Hi everyone. Thanks very much. I think my sound's okay, right? Okay, great. I'm gonna play something if I can figure this out quickly, and if not, someone's gonna have to try to help me because it's kind of gone dark. I don't know why. Okay. I just need to play that audio, and it sort of disappeared off the screen.
Audio?
Yeah, the file's on there, but it was down there, but it sort of disappeared.
Too many things on it, that's why. So. This guy? No? Oh. No. What is this, my friend?
I don't know what that is.
I know what it is. Spyware, cropware, whatever it is. Lots of fun there. There, this thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, we'll start from the beginning?
Yeah, from the beginning.
All right. Lots of excitement, everybody. Thank you.
My name is John Lowengarth. I'm recording this because we may not live through the night. They're here, they're hostile, and powerful people don't want you to know. History as we know it is a lie.
The following is an excerpt from the majestic documents, which are said to have been leaked from above top secret. It describes the official government secrecy policy toward extraterrestrial contact. This policy was adopted in April 1954, 2 months after Eisenhower had first contact with at least 3 extraterrestrial races.
Any encounter with entities known to be of extraterrestrial origin is to be considered to be a matter of national security and therefore classified top secret. Under no circumstances is the general public or the public press to learn of the existence of these entities. The official government policy is that such creatures do not exist, and that no agency of the federal government is now engaged in any study of extraterrestrials or their artifacts. Any deviation from the stated policy is absolutely forbidden. Magic eyes only. What the hell they want?
I assume you, ladies and gentlemen, have all seen E.T. They're nowhere near that nice.
Okay, I don't know if you could understand that because there's a little garbled sounding, but that is a short excerpt at the end from Taken, and he says they're nowhere near that nice. And so I think that should have stopped by itself. I'm going to hope that it does. Okay, hold on 1 minute here. So this is about as full screen as I think I'm going to get it. Unless... Okay. Great. Okay, first of all, and this is going to be a little difficult because it's kind of hard for me to see y'all. But if you raise your hand, if you could tell me if you, first of all, say how many people are familiar with Project Camelot? Raise your hand. Okay, a very good showing. How many are not familiar with Project Camelot? Please raise your hand. Okay, there's a few. All right, so mostly familiar. The reason I ask you that is because I can go way down the rabbit hole, and I just want to make sure that the people who don't know who I am and don't know who Project Camelot is get sort of a briefing along the way, and they're just going to have to kind of get up to speed really fast. So at the end, I will allow at least a half hour for questions, and I'm happy to answer anything, really. Okay, so hopefully this will work. These are some of the pictures of our whistleblowers. What we do is we investigate whistleblower testimony like Julian Assange, but we go way above top secret. So that means that our whistleblowers, by and large, have above top secret clearances. And that means they could be magic eyes only or above. And this is a very select group of people. Obviously, being a whistleblower is a very dangerous pastime for ex-military employees and members of the secret space program, etc. Now, some of these people are authors and researchers. Most of them will be quite well known. Other people are also experiencers or contactees, and so we really go the whole gamut. We investigate every kind of conspiracy out there, and there's very few things that we would say we're not interested in, because we are all about revealing the matrix as it really is and what's really going on beneath the matrix, and I better be careful. Here are some of the whistleblowers and witnesses, and people that know Camelot will recognize these faces. Okay, so Project Camelot was started, actually I've been in operation for over 8 years at this point. It was in 2006 that I hooked up with Bill Ryan, and Bill Ryan, this is him as a baby. We put our baby pictures on here. It was kind of a joke. That's Bill Ryan. Everyone recognizes the hat. He's actually not part of Camelot anymore, other than, you know, you're always part of Camelot if you've been involved with it. But he does his own thing. He's living in Ecuador with his wife at this time, kind of off the grid, creating a community, I imagine, down there. We're not in close touch. And I've been running Camelot for about 4 years. So after 8 years of operation, that means he was with me about half the time. We have a huge following on the internet, and it is growing every day. And we're very happy about that. However, I can say that just recently, if you're paying attention to Project Camelot, then you know that I did an interview with M.T. Kesh, who is a free energy inventor, and he's actually a physicist from Iran originally, who then went to Belgium and started an organization called the Kesh Foundation. He's been very involved in what's called plasma physics, but then he actually kind of went off in his own direction. He's quite a brilliant man, and he is now releasing to the world all of his paperwork, all of his experiments, and he is training a core group of people who have joined him voluntarily, connected with him over the internet and so on. And he's just trying to get his work out there to the world. What happened was Sunday I did what was probably my third or fourth interview with him, but he had contacted me, and some other people on the web let us know that he was being actually threatened. He and his wife had been, and family were being threatened by the ex-king of Belgium. He had had to leave Belgium with his family, and he went to Italy. For the last, I think, half year or so, he was living in Italy and continuing his experiments and his investigations with his team. And then the threats started and actually intensified. I guess they've been going on all along. The threats became so severe that now he's not sure he's going to be able to continue living even. And they have threatened to torture his wife and child in front of him, etc. So if you listen to my video, which is on the Project Camelot YouTube channel, it's called Jag Bodhi. It's you know, sort of a combination of jaguar and the word bodhisattva, really. I just made it up. Then you will see that we have a huge amount of videos there. Actually, there's around, well, there was 274, and now there's more. And we still have even more that some of which have not gone onto YouTube, most of which are all there. It takes hours and hours and hours of your life to watch our videos. What we don't do is sound bites. What we do is we interview somebody for at least 2 hours. We put a camera right straight in front of their face. We intercut between me, the interviewer, and the person. I ask hard questions. I'm not your usual interviewer. I get a lot of flack for that, but I'm not apologizing here because I actually honed my skills as an actor and a director and a writer in Hollywood. And so I actually know what I'm doing. When I interrupt people on purpose, I'm actually trying to cut across their programming. And a lot of these people, a lot of the people I deal with, whistleblowers, even authors and experiencers, but especially whistleblowers and experiencers, will have a lot of programming. And what happens, programming becomes obvious when a person starts talking kind of like a tape is going in their head. And you can almost, well, at least I can tell as an intuitive, and if you get good at this, anyone could probably figure it out. So if you interrupt them, what happens is you interrupt the tape in their head. And you require the mind to become engaged, and the emotions, because they get a little befuddled by being interrupted. A lot of people have canned speeches and explanations for things that they're used to sort of spieling out. But in my interviews, I'm really looking for the truth. I'm doing that on behalf of humanity. I think it's something that everyone needs to know. I think you have a right to it. I think you can handle it. And I don't avoid the hard questions. So that's what Project Camelot is all about. It is guerrilla filmmaking for all intents and purposes. We do not rely on heavy electronics or we don't have a big crew. It was always just Bill Ryan, myself, and a volunteer cinematographer, or myself by myself. And that's really what we've been doing for the last 8 years. It's been incredibly successful. We are building what we consider to be the big picture of what's going on here in this reality. And I'll be happy to talk about that in depth tonight. Some of the major questions you want to ask yourself are these particular questions. And it's really important. Surprisingly few people, maybe not so much yourselves, because as members of this organization, or even if you're here as a visitor, also here we're all visitors to planet Earth. But if you're here at UPARS as a visitor, then you know that, that we are not alone. But the question is, what is the plot? What is really going on here? Because you know that your world is not completely under your control. That we are dealing with races and beings, power structures such as the Illuminati, but also behind the Illuminati, the question is who's running them. So I never stop at any particular juncture. I'm always going beyond every layer. There's another layer of control. And so that's really what the investigation is about. And it's an ongoing investigation. I'm not saying I've got all the answers, but I'm coming up with quite a few lately. But there's still more to be had. So, yeah, I think these are self-explanatory. I do want to talk about the psychology of whistleblowers for a moment, because I find that people are really puzzled by whistleblowers. What is a whistleblower in the sense that, what is their psychology? What's going on in their head? You have to understand that a whistleblower from a secret space program, or from the secret government, and you're talking again above top secret, is a person who has decided to work for all intents and purposes, like it or not, for the dark side. Now, some souls come onto the planet Earth and they decide to work for the dark side for up to a certain point. You could call it market research, you could call it the investigation, you could call it the soul's journey to try to experience something on the dark side, to learn enough to be able to deliver it over to the light. And the light would be humanity in general, who have not chosen a dark path. And so those people are called whistleblowers. They cross the line at a certain point in their trajectory and decide to turn against their masters and tell the truth to humanity. They decide that their sort of loyalties live with humanity and not with the powers that be, not with money, not with greed, not with whatever it is they happen to be building, whether it be a network of nano-satellites over your heads, which is indeed going on, called Project Leonid. It was revealed by Anthony Sanchez, a researcher and an author, and a software engineer, who was approached by Lockheed Martin scientists who went on the run from their organization, from Lockheed, after they did a survey and started to, were trying to investigate whether or not the nano self-replicating AI, artificial intelligent nanosatellites, would turn against humans at any point. And what the Lockheed Martin scientists began to find out is that there was at least a 40% chance that they would turn on humans, and possibly greater. This actually kind of woke them up. But it also, what happened after that was that several of the scientists started to disappear. And the one scientist that did go on the run, and I think there was more than one, I think there was actually two, feared for his life, decided that his days were numbered, and so he contacted Anthony, not Project Camelot, but Anthony Sanchez, because Anthony had a background in software engineering and had had his own company, had worked for many top Northern California high-tech companies, and had something of a reputation in that area. So then what happens is I interviewed Anthony Sanchez, and I interviewed him a number of times. It is interesting to note that Anthony has actually spoken at conferences, he has gone on the radio, and he has done some short audio interviews with me as well. However, I've interviewed him in person with the camera for an over 2-hour interview, and when he returned home, he found that morning there was a note on his car. There was no obvious entry into his garage, but his car had a note on the inside window. It basically said that he and his family would be killed if he was to continue and release that interview. So I had to put that interview on the back burner because Anthony asked me to keep him safe. So that's just only one example of where a person who even is out on the public, in the public sector, has been given information that's very, very important, and I interview him, and basically he gets a death threat. Now what happened also was that I got a call, and the call was from an agent who had worked for top intelligence agencies around the world, and was known to us, was known to me. And basically he was delivering a message from the Illuminati, and the message was that they knew that Anthony had been given documents that contained, like software codes and various specs and things of that nature. And the message was for me to tell Anthony that if he released any of that information, any of the details to do with the technology, that he would be killed. So, I delivered the message to Anthony as his friend, and that's how things go out there. So, when I'm talking about the psychology of whistleblowers, so on the one hand, in a sense, when Anthony is given that kind of information, like documentation that contains specs, and yet he goes out and he does talk about what he's getting in general terms, he's not able to go into specifics. And this is part of what goes on. And then the other thing is they have to protect their friends and family as well as themselves. And so what happens also is that the whistleblowers themselves blow very hot and very cold. So at times they will speak to us, they will give us a whole testimony, and then a day or two later they will get a threatening phone call. Someone will bring them in. I've had Pete Peterson was a perfect example. After I interviewed him we actually interviewed him for like 6 hours. We spent an entire weekend with him. He was called back to the Pentagon, and after that he called me up and he wanted us not to release the interview, but basically, most importantly of the entire interview, because there was a section done by me, Bill Ryan, and David Wilcock, who happened to accompany us up to see Pete Peterson. And the only section he really didn't want out there was the one he did with me. So this is the kind of thing that goes on. Now, the other thing about whistleblowers is they are not necessarily, speakers who know how to charm you and speak well on a stage. Sometimes they are. Most of the time they are trained in remote viewing. They are highly psychic. I've found that most government employees on that level, higher levels, are trained in using their, beyond the sixth senses, so to speak. And some of them are augmented. I have a whistleblower who's been augmented in numerous ways. He is what's called, I believe they call him an umbrella. And what that, it's like a code term for an agent who is actually 360, who has all the different capabilities, not only of an agent, but of a super soldier, of a super psychic, a psychic warrior, and that sort of thing. So all packaged into one person. And they're also an ET communicator. So that's a very unique agent. Okay, let's see, what else? Current status of whistleblowers, so that's a huge topic. What I'm going to do is, because I have so many, different whistleblowers to talk about, I'm going to just be singling out certain ones to highlight. And during the question and answer session, you can ask me, myriad questions of the ones that interest you. We can also go over solutions as we go on. So first of all, before we go into all that, I want to say that there are after 8 years of investigating this 24/7, I want to also say that I had a background in Eastern philosophy. I studied things like the Tarot, the I Ching, Eastern philosophy on all levels, Tao, Zen, you name it. And I also meditated for many years. So I learned all about Kundalini Yoga and so on. I also learned about the occult. I studied, for example, the work of Aleister Crowley and the Illuminati sort of symbolism and the mentality behind what motivates the Illuminati to do what they do, to behave the way they behave. And all of this has served me very well in Camelot. At the time I was studying these things, I simply wanted to know. I was not a practicing magician or any of that, but I wanted to understand the intellectual motivation behind the dark side, because I really didn't understand why planet Earth was so screwed up as a kid. And so I was motivated to go down this road. And what the conclusion that I came to after all these years is that there are two major paths. One has to do with angelic humans, which is to do with you developing at your own rate, re-evolving back to source, becoming a creator of reality and other realities, and going beyond this level, and basically, going back to source through ascension, however you want to view that. Okay, and that's in your own good time. The other is Robotic Superman. Robotic Superman is the side that the secret space has taken. It's the choice that the dark side and the military-industrial complex, for all intents and purposes, is motivated to follow. What that involves is things like building super soldiers that have augmented parts that are, using AI and mechanical parts and nano and so on and so forth, pushing your trajectory along by force, trying to be better, bigger, faster, and so on. And that's what they're all about. And they don't want to stop just at planet Earth. They're all about creating humanity 2.0. They want to go beyond Earth. They also want to get rid of the old style of humanity. In other words, the ones that are slow, the ones that are aging. They want to get rid of aging, for that matter. They want to live as long as they can, probably longer than even the Anunnaki are currently living, which is around, 800 to 1,000 years from what I understand. And they have various means by going, by following out this agenda. So that's the Robotic Superman side of things. It definitely involves a sort of human that is a superhuman. Now, why would they be motivated to do this? And a lot of people don't understand what's going on in their head. And first of all, you have to understand occult philosophy to understand part of what Illuminati and being an Illuminati is all about. But the bottom line is that they see their trajectory. They know they're going back to source at some point. Even a dark side person, eventually, even at a certain point in their trajectory, is going to have to go back to source. But they want to stay material. They are very focused on this material reality for as long as possible, where they can have power over you, power over others, that's key, and where they can also manipulate reality for self. In other words, for self-enhancement and for pleasure. And so this is their motivations. They also want to conquer other worlds. That means that they're aware that there are ET races, that we are not alone, that you can go out among the stars, and there are all kinds of beings out there. But they do not want to be the ones that are going to be the slaves of those various races. They know that there are various races out there that are still on a trajectory that involves the dark side themselves. So they don't want to fall prey to the reptilians or the various races. And they are motivated to therefore make a better human because they know that there are vulnerabilities in this particular version of humanity. Even so, from my point of view and from everything I've gathered, humanity is a huge genetic experiment. And I believe that there were at least 12 ET races that got together, some positive, some negative. So they weren't all from the positive side, but basically contributed their DNA to create this being we call humanity, or the human. So you are all hybrids. And this is not just something coming off the top of my head. It is basically taking all of the testimony that I've gotten over the years, gelling it down, and figuring out what was being said, what information we've got. So that's what's going on here. In other words, what happens if you're 12, a hybrid of 12 different ET races or more, and it's increasing because we have new visiting races to this planet all the time, and they want to get in on the game, and they often will get involved in a genetic engineering program with various humans. And the gray ET abduction scenarios is one of those, by the way. So what happens is if you're a composite of at least 12 ET races and they all have amazing powers, then what you have to understand is that you have those powers. They're all potential within you. Now we're all different mixtures of those races, and this is where you get this melting pot on planet Earth. And so as a hybrid, you must understand that there's also this thing going on where you're having an oppression on the planet where the dark side does not want you to know what I'm telling you right now. And among other things, since we got involved with Kesh and free energy and so on, that will free you to go out and to explore the universes, the multiverses, to begin to realize who you really are, etc., to free you from going to work and coming home and watching TV for an hour and going to sleep. Because that treadmill keeps you on a little treadmill like a little, guinea pig or whatever, and you can never get off. And they know that, and that's where they want to keep you. Because if you start using your mind, if you start really meditating and activating your chakras, raising your vibration, you become extremely dangerous. And the more of you that do that, the more dangerous you become. So there is this game going on here on planet Earth. The dark side wants to keep the top on, the light side, and there are light side beings that do help you, and when you want to access them, you just, put the information out there and they will come around. And basically they're pushing it up. It's like steam rising in a pot, and the dark side is pushing it down, so there's this battle going on. Okay, so ETs and off-worlders. What do they want? These are some of the basic things they want. Gold is a very complex situation because what gold is all about is many things. First of all, it has been used by the Anunnaki. I think Sitchin was quite correct in based on the Sumerian tablets, etc., that we were mining gold as semi-slaves for the Anunnaki at one point. That they came here to the planet, that they did get some of the humans that were available, and there were different races of humans here at that time, and they did dumb down their DNA. They interfered with their DNA. And now that has spread to most of the DNA on the planet, so most people have had what is sort of a break or a limitation, and that's where you get the junk DNA on one side and your regular DNA on another. But the reality is that junk DNA is anything but junk. So what happens is Anunnaki started to realize that if they allowed you to continue on the current re-evolution, so to speak, that you were on at that time, that you would surpass them. Because if you take these amazing races and you combine their DNA, you're going to be that much more. if you have a purebred race, they're going to only be what they are. Now, Anunnaki have also been messed with along their trajectory. They do have from what I understand, from all the information I've gotten, there is an Anunnaki race, which is the Syrian Anunnaki, which is half reptilian and half humanoid. But there is an Anunnaki race, from what I understand, that is quite possibly pure humanoid, but not human. Certainly they're at least 9 feet tall. Some are 12 and taller, 12 feet tall. There appear to be a number of races here on the planet Earth at this time, some of whom are quite camouflaged. And we were in touch with a policeman, ex-policeman in the UK who got in contact with us before he died. He liked our work very much. His name was Tony Dodd. Some of you may have heard of him. And he was very well connected with a group of the Illuminati in Britain, as well as high-level military people. He told us confidentially a couple of things. One of the things he told us is that Torchwood, which is a television series that came out of the UK, and there's now an American version of Torchwood, which you may have seen. But the original series was based on the truth. In other words, the British and the Americans had teams of what were in essence, humans and possibly a bit of help, going out, searching out ETs from various races who are wandering around this planet, and either imprisoning them, killing them, or bringing them on board to their agenda or whatever was necessary. So they were actually going out doing that. And he told us that if we released that information, we could be killed. But we released it anyway. We gave him a false name, but it was on our site since the time he told us. Another thing he told us is that there's a certain race of beings that are ET that are here on the planet that have a weird baby finger. It's crooked or something, kind of bent. And that's one of the ways you can tell who they are. And this was something that he, as a policeman, kept an eye out for. And British police, the British are a very interesting group of people, because I've spent quite a bit of time in Britain over the years. As you can appreciate, that Bill Ryan, my ex-partner in Camelot, was British. But the British are releasing information in a different way to their people, in Britain. And oftentimes a little more high level than what you get in the United States. Or at least it was that way for years. I think actually it's reversed at this time. It's starting to change. That the American sort of movie industry, television industry has sort of gotten up to speed far enough that they've eclipsed the British. But it used to be much more so that the British people were getting sort of clued in if they paid attention. Now, the media. Okay, the media is telling you the truth. And this is part of what the Illuminati are all about. This is part of the principles of how they operate. Okay, they believe that if you're too dumb to get the truth, if it's presented to you, that you don't deserve the truth, and therefore you can be killed because you're not worth having around. It's kind of a, let the strongest survive kind of principle. And the other side of that is in terms of personal responsibility, you could call it kind of karmic debt if you want, although it's not quite literally that. They are also sort of paying the piper when they try to tell you what they're going to do before they do it. What they believe is that absolves them of any responsibility, any karmic debt, because in essence they put it out there, they told the truth, and so it's a magical act. Everything that they do is a magical act, and therefore you can see the setups of the false flags, etc., all involve magic. They will involve magic numbers. They will involve symbols all over the place. They will have patsies, numerous patsies standing by. But when they operate, it has to do with their occult sort of magical concoctions that they're putting together because they want a certain desired result. and they're following sort of the rules of the universe that do involve magic. Sometimes this gets a bad name because magic is not positive or negative. If it's used properly and understood in the natural laws of the universe, it can be used to a very positive effect. Simply like the law of attraction would be an example of a magical law that is part of the universe. Okay, talked about this. Okay. You know, it's hard for me because a lot of this stuff is really obvious. And what I find is, you know, because I've been doing this for so long, and most of the researchers and the people speaking out there are still trying to prove to you that ETs exist. And Project Camelot is like way beyond that. ETs are here. They're among us. We are ET. And I'm not impressed by ETs either. So, you know, that doesn't mean there can't be impressive beings among ETs. It just means that I understand my multidimensional self, and I understand through being in touch with my higher self that I am not just here on planet Earth at this time, just like the rest of you. We are multidimensional. That means we live many lifetimes simultaneously because all time is simultaneous. It can be seen as a circle. So if you understand that and you start to grok who you might be in all your different incarnations, and you start to realize what a huge being you are, and that doesn't even include like being part of Source, which the more sort of awareness you have is the greater your connection to Source. So you can think of it as if there were streams of light going straight up from around you, and all that information was coming down, and you had access to all that information, then your flow through to Source is complete. So you would be, you know, a totally awakened being, and that obviously is the objective. In fact, enlightenment is the name of the game. The Illuminati know that enlightenment is the name of the game. They know that's the end game. It's the end game on every planet. It's the end game for every ET race. Along the way, what you're going to be doing is building worlds. What you will ultimately be doing is shepherding other human-like creatures, whatever kind of concoction they come up with in the future, of the various races that contribute their DNA. You can appreciate that the next step is for you to shepherd those races on the way back to Source, to enlightenment, to total self-realization. So it's not a simplistic game that we've got going on here on Earth. It's not limited in any way. You are part of something enormous, and eventually you will be creator, gods, whatever you want to call that. But hopefully you will be a positive light being, creating and recreating and going back to Source when you decide to do so. And you will do so on your own intent. Okay. Now, the so-called Illuminati, of course, uses technology. It doesn't mean that the angelic human doesn't use technology. It's important to understand that you may use technology, but it's not that we want technology to use us. And the bottom line with what's going on here on planet Earth is, for all intents and purposes, the technology is part of Metatron. And what Metatron is this sort of, you could think of Metatron as sort of a consciousness or a being embodying that consciousness, kind of like, you know, Satan or the devil. But this being that involves a Metatronic consciousness that has to do with robotics and has to do with putting you into a cog in a machine, a gigantic machine, a machine that's an artificial intelligence. And basically taking away your uniqueness, taking away your unique gifts as the human that you are, and keeping you on a certain level so that the machine can operate. And you just simply become a cog. So that when you find yourself thinking in very robotic type ways, if you become too connected to the technology around you, what you will ultimately find is that you start losing your humanity. And some of these things were experienced by other races of beings, Greys being one of them. And the Greys lost all their, a certain group of Greys lost all their emotionality. And they came back to Earth at this time because they ultimately wanted to create a race of what will be hybrids, human-Grey hybrids, that will be able to communicate. In other words, the Grey essence will be able to come through, which is reptilian at base, the ones that are not, bioengineered, robots. And they wanted to combine the human DNA because they had lost this extra added thing called intelligence, but it's emotional intelligence. And this is something that even our scientists, and psychologists, therapists, whoever they are out there, don't even acknowledge. In the end, this human that you are contains this really special combination of intellect and emotion that makes for this sort of third brain, if you will. And because of that, nobody can tell you what your IQ, so to speak, really is. When they give you an IQ test, they're only testing like the mental by itself, and even that is all about how programmed are you, and can you recite, by rote a bunch of nonsense you've been told since you were a child, which is really robotic information. So please don't believe them when they tell you you have an IQ of something. This is nonsense. They cannot measure emotional intelligence, and this is similar to the fact that they can't figure women out, because women have a very high degree of emotional intelligence. It is sort of this magic potion that's part of the human. And it needs to be investigated more, it needs to be discussed more, it needs to be understood. One of the qualities of emotional intelligence, in other words, taking the intellect and combining it with the heart, when you do that in emotions, you actually become resonant. And what resonance is sort of a vibrational rate that tells you when you're encountering truth. And right now, you'll actually feel there's sort of a vibration in this room because I'm talking the truth. And it actually vibrates the molecules in and around your body. And that goes for anyone that speaks the truth, anytime. And we have these extra abilities to sense resonance and then to vibrate with that. So there's a sort of an entrainment, if you will, in a good way. And there certainly is entrainment in a negative way. But there's an entrainment in a good way that you do resonate with truth. And that's a gift to humanity in a sense. But it's what you're all about. Okay, I think I covered all that. Well, let me say the thing about time travelers. Now, I actually did a conference in 2013 on time travel. And it's a fabulous conference. It's available on the web. It's available by DVD on Project Camelot. And you can either stream it. Every speaker speaks for like around 2 hours. And we have phenomenal speakers. The stream is available for like $7, which is really reasonable for what you get. And I've got David Wilcock and Bashar and, just Preston Nichols, just amazing speakers. And there's like 12 of them or something. Or you can buy the set of DVDs or the individual DVDs if you want to own them. Now, we're also selling Camelot interviews, which are, for those that have never followed Camelot, available since we started. We decided that we were going to let this information out to people for free. Because we believe that knowledge should be, the rightful, sort of genetic, rightful gift or whatever that humanity has. And we wanted to be part of that. The only sort of other side of that is that becomes very difficult to sort of pay your rent on the very basic level. And so after a couple of years of living basically off a small inheritance that I got when my mother passed on and a small inheritance that Bill got from when his mother passed on, we kind of ran out of money and we started asking for donations, and people have been very generous with us, and that's why we've continued to operate. But what we're doing now is we're starting to take all the free information on the web and package it into DVDs. not, to sell. And costs a lot of money and a lot of time. It's an incredibly headache to make DVDs. But we're doing it because if the grid goes down, then we may lose the net. And if the freedoms in the United States keep going in the direction they're going, you may also lose Camelot along the way, simply because they will consider this to be, they might consider us terrorists, for example, because we go against the mainstream reality. So the bottom line is that we want these collector's items to be out there so that if the grid goes down by an electronic pulse, which it could do, and they may actually do it on purpose, according to one of our whistleblowers, Henry Deacon, who's also known as Arthur Neumann, who told us this at least, 6 years ago, and now it's becoming even more likely, that then DVDs may be one of the only sources, of course, of this sort of incredible library of information that we have generated on the web. Another source, of course, is books and hardcover books and things of that nature. So that's another reason why we're making the DVDs at this time. And the third reason, of course, is to help pay the rent. Okay, so let me see. Oh yeah, time travelers. So as far as I'm concerned, we're all time travelers. And you have that as part of your genetic makeup. And one of the ways you can kind of test this is by what you do when you go to sleep every night. In essence, you kind of leave your body and you go off and you do explorations and so on. Now, some of you may remain on a certain etheric level. Others may travel beyond that level. But regardless, the more you raise your vibration, the more you're going to have what's called a light body that is intact, that cannot be interfered with. And you will be able to change dimensions and travel indeed in time. And you are also able to do it while you're in this body. And some people, even in the audience, may have had some very strange kind of time travel events. They may see time happening around them in some bizarre way. They may be like me, which is to be something of a precog, and you go to, when I travel, I go to a place like Egypt or India, and I start to see the landscape in front of me change, and I start to get all kinds of information that involves, ET races that used to be there, my own past lives, and sometimes the entire environment changes around me. And I get a download of all kinds of things. So if you, all I have to do is be standing here telling you to entertain the possibility that you're a time traveler, and if you start to take that on board, it will actually start to open up those channels within you that involve activating that side of you and bringing that consciousness, because consciousness actually changes reality. A lot of people think that you have to actually do something to change reality. And you have to understand that as a human being, you change reality chemically, in other words, etherically, and beyond that, and I'm not a scientist, but I can tell you that you change it simply by thinking. And this is sometimes, I think, a hard concept for people to understand. But I think I would encourage you to test that in your own lives, if you don't believe me. And it also involves, though, clear intention. But it does not mean that you have to visualize everything about the thing that you're aiming for, whatever it happens to be about reality that you want to change. Generally speaking, what you need to do is sort of open yourself up to whatever the universe will bring to you as a result of your intention. And then as that thing comes towards you, allowing it and not interfering with it. And what happens with a lot of people when they begin this sort of, and it's a kind of a magical act, is what they end up doing is they put themselves in their own way. So they start in with sort of negative thoughts and negative patterns and blocking themselves. And sometimes, and I find this really interesting because, and it doesn't mean I'm above it, because we all have a huge mixture of things, right? So some things you might want, you think you want, but you have actually not acknowledged why you might not want that thing to come to you. And it could be a good reason, because your higher soul has got a very good plan for you. And you're the one who kind of were there making it at the time. And now that you're here on earth, you might have forgotten it. So what I would say to you is, you know, to be patient with yourselves, to be hugely forgiving, not only of yourselves, but of others, and to understand that you may be putting obstacles in your own way. And if you start making mistakes or make typos, or you screw up something, or you sort of like wanted to go down a certain road and you start drifting over to another road, or whatever it is, sometimes there's a reason. Sometimes there's a learning experience that needs to take place before you get to the ultimate goal. And to allow for those things, because there's almost a natural intelligence to this thing we call life, and it's all around us. P. Peterson would call it the information field. This stuff, this ether, is what they called it in the early 1900s, and they're starting to talk about it again as that now. Okay, this is kind of where we're going right now, and ultimately I'm working on a website now called Project Light Warrior that will be talking about doing some of the things I'm talking about here today to you. Now, I'm not talking just about whistleblower testimony, as you can appreciate. What I'm talking about is information that has come to me through that testimony, but also through other sources. And I can say that I've been visited by many ETs over the years, and I don't think that's strange. You know, they come to me when I'm sleeping. Sometimes they visit me. I've had various beings. I had like an amphibious woman come and sing to me all night in this most amazing voice. And when I woke up, I could still hear her singing in my ear. She had also been talking to me. I have no idea what we talked about, but somehow I think I carry it with me. There was another experience I had with a little old Andromedan man, who I think is one of the guys that visits Alex Collier, and he was this little old man with a bald head, and this was before Camelot. And at the time, he came and sat by my bed all night and talked to me. At the very end, right before I woke up, I said to him, "Wait a minute, what planet are you from, or where are you from?" And he said, "Andromeda." And then I woke up, just like that. And of course, at that time, I didn't know who Alex Collier was, hadn't read anything about it or any of that stuff. So, I mean, these are the things that do happen. Happen to me, I'm sure it can happen to you. And so, I mean, it can be a marvelous world to be part of out there. We are all communicating with all kinds of beings, and this is a very dynamic universe. It is also a lot it's a lot more negative than you probably know, and it's a lot more positive than you probably can comprehend. So that's what I've gotten on my journey from Project Camelot, is to realize that this rabbit hole goes so much deeper than you could ever imagine. Okay. I mean, there is so much here that this is top level. So, hold on one second. I think yeah. Okay, so we have a choice on planet Earth, and in the end, you're not just here to kind of go to work and come home and have a career. Careers are very nice, but in the end, you're actually here on a mission, and it's really up to you whether you decide to accept that mission. We are basically facing becoming a slave planet. This may be an AI-run slave planet, and we are very close to that at this time. That's where you get the revelations of Edward Snowden, that from Project Camelot's point of view were known really about 7 or 8 years, even since the beginning. He has not been releasing the really bottom line of what's really going on as far as the level of surveillance that you are under. It is not a joke to say that if you want to talk to the CIA or one of the agencies, just turn to the wall and start talking. You know, and I think that most people understand that at this point. But on the other hand, there are ways to escape the grid slightly. It appears that they don't surveil certain things as much. And if you go to Africa, places where there's lots of chaos, it's much harder, I think, for the what you may call the machine. When I say the machine, I'm talking about an artificial intelligence that has scalar weaponry and the ability to use its satellites to surveil and more than that, which involves hyperdimensional physics, etc. And this all comes from whistleblower testimony. The bottom line is that they really do have an amazing access to us if they want to, and they did not lose Flight 370. Okay. And that's where that goes is that there is a huge secret space program. So when you think about the military-industrial complex as you know it on the surface Earth, you have to understand that NASA is simply a front organization. And I've worked for JPL, and JPL is Jet Propulsion Lab. I was a contractor there for a short while, working in communications. And I can tell you that there are great, brilliant scientists, you know, engineers and scientists there from all over the world. They are basically, for all intents and purposes, and I hate to say this, reinventing the wheel in a sense, because the secret space program has, the secret space program is basically operating beyond them. And most of those scientists are either not aware of it, because they simply keep the blinders on and go to work every day and are in denial. Because if you're smart, you have to be in denial over this in order to say it doesn't exist, because the signs are everywhere. And even this was true of JPL on the ground. Now, JPL was also started by Jack Parsons, for all intents and purposes, who was a member of the occult. And he was a protege of Aleister Crowley, for those of you who don't know that. And he was a rocket scientist on top of it. And in JPL, there are black magicians that actually practice black magic. They're up in those hills at night in various locations. And I've gotten testimony behind the scenes about that. Okay, so, let's see. Some of this is really obvious. One thing that, just to let you know, I have a list somewhere here. Like, these are some of our whistleblowers. And without exception, they all are incredibly telepathic and psychic. And, you know, I've seen this proved to me a number of times. And the more you're in this game, it sort of goes with the territory, because the more awake you become, the more your third eye and your abilities start to open up, and you really do start to see the future. You start to get information all the time. You start to know when somebody's lying to you. You start to be able to communicate with somebody. I know when I'm going to hear from a certain person. Sometimes even before an interview, I will get a download the night before of information. I will even spend time talking to that person sort of in the ether of the dream world. Not because I plan to do it, because it just happens. It's like my soul knows what the job is, and that's what goes on. And that has happened to me a number of times before an interview. So most people know who Dan Burish is, and there's a whole saga associated with Dan Burish. I'm happy to answer any questions. This is sort of old news, but it's still important. I mean, let me just say this about the Gray Human Hybrid program. There are various members of Grays, and supposedly there are various members of various timelines as well, multiple timelines, in fact. And so people that tell you they know what's going to happen and see the future often are not taking into account the fact that there are many timelines. And so I want to caution you in listening to the people out there, because the more you get involved in this sector as a researcher, an author, whatever you happen to be, a lot of these people start to get huge egos, and they start to decide that they have the answers, and they start to think that they know what's going to happen. The trouble is they can't predict you. Computers can't predict you, ultimately. Now, they try really hard, and they do a pretty good job, the AI, for example. But the bottom line is that you are still this being or this beingness that is so expansive and so unpredictable, and you are growing every day. And this kind of an organization where you come, you meet, you awaken each other, and then you go out and perhaps awaken others around you. This is a place where this kind of growth is happening in leaps and bounds every day. So you have to understand that on planet Earth at this point, we're entering a really interesting juncture because they cannot predict where your consciousness is going to go. Therefore, they can't predict what will happen tomorrow. Because awareness changes reality. And so I'm just going to repeat that. Awareness changes reality. If you become aware of something, suddenly it changes everything you say and do and the way you behave, even if you're trying not to have that happen. And one of the ways to sort of test that, I don't know if people here know about the story about, there was a mirage in China of a whole coastline from another era that started to appear on cameras. And it just, there's actually on the internet, you can actually see the photographs where the timeline started to bleed and there are facades of cities. And there's also the story that I'm sure you've heard about the American Indians who couldn't see the ships that Columbus was arriving on, supposedly, because they didn't have that concept in their minds. Now, I think eventually they did see them once they got off the ships because they were humans and they probably started making their lives really miserable. But at any rate, you know, it's this kind of thing where your awareness, if you start to become aware of something, you're going to pierce through the veil and you're going to let that thing in, whatever it is. So you also need to be protective of yourself and others around you in that sense, and sensitive to knowing that that's the case. I'm not going to go into all that about the timelines here, but eventually Dan Burish did escape. He helped the ET who he was working with escape through the pyramid, and the ET left. He helped him go home, in essence, which is pretty cool. Now, let me say something about the relationship between Dan Burish and Marcia McDowell, and they are part of Majestic 12. It's a real organization. It's not called Majestic 12 anymore, of course. It's called, well, sometimes it's called Scion, sometimes it's called the Committee, sometimes it's got some other names. The bottom line is that they basically are employees of Majestic, and they were told to turn on Camelot at a certain point in our trajectory. The reason they did so was because one of our witnesses, Henry Deacon, also known as Arthur Neumann, went on stage in Barcelona, where we were also invited to speak. We were holding a panel. We were chairs of a panel there. Through about 1,500 people, and Henry Deacon went on stage, and he is a person who has worked on Mars on a regular basis. And he got there through what was called, you know, you could say a jump gate. We coined it a jump room in one of our interviews, but he has since said it's not really a jump room. Call it what you will. He kind of described it. Actually, he was there in person at my time travel conference, and you can get his DVD online or stream the speech he made, and that was a little over a year ago. But the bottom line is that Dan Burish and Marcia McDowell were told to turn against us because at that point in our trajectory, Camelot was becoming too well known. We were waking up too many people, and they decided to turn against us. So they did. They wrote us a letter. They told us we were no longer protected, in fact, quite the contrary, and that they would no longer be able to speak to us ever again, and so on and so forth. So it is really interesting when you get deeply involved in this game, the stuff that goes on between people. And you do have to sort of have a really, you know, I wouldn't say a tough soul, but whatever. You have to be strong. You have to be strong emotionally to understand that the more you know, the more responsibility goes with it, and the more you're going to be messed with. Because the powers that be really don't want people to become awakened. And if you start to spread your influence through being on Facebook or whatever you use, they're going to come knocking on your door. And if you have a potential of being very awakened, they will also hassle you before you do anything. So you'll have people maybe in this crowd who consider themselves somewhat victims of heavy-duty electronic harassment, things of this nature. You're not crazy. This goes on every day. People are always contacting me about this stuff. It's very real. They are using mind control over the masses in mass, and of course the chemtrails are part of that. So we're really talking about a whole concerted effort to keep humanity dumbed down. That's what it's all about. They don't want your auras to rise. They don't want your awareness to rise. They want to keep you down on a certain level so they can control you. Okay, where are we? Okay, we probably have no time left. This is Henry Deacon. A few things just about him. Solar Warden is really interesting. Of all his testimony that he gave us, and we have long transcripts, he never initially wanted to go before the camera. He only became brave at a certain point when Brian O'Leary, an ex-astronaut, was talking about free energy. He went on stage to support him in a small conference that Bill was giving in Switzerland, and it was that was the only time he started coming out under his real name, which is Arthur Neumann. But the bottom line is, Solar Warden is the only part of his testimony he ever wanted us to delete and take back. We refused. It had been on the web for a few years at that point, and that was pretty meaningless. But what we did do, what I decided to do, was to actually change his testimony to please him, to the degree of saying that, note, you know, Henry Deacon wishes to say that he wishes Solar Warden and information pertaining to that to be removed from his testimony. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you that of all his testimony, that's probably the most important. This is, you know, I mean, this is how you have to think. And another way of really understanding how to break through the programming is that if people around you are telling you that somebody is bad and just, you know, don't believe anything they say, and they're lying, and there's a whole, you know, concerted effort to sort of attack that person, then I would tell you, listen to that person. Go the opposite direction from the crowd, and don't do it every time, without question. Question everything. Never follow the crowd. And that includes if they decide to send ships down here to supposedly rescue you. Because what those ships are really is probably most likely commandeered by reptilians and other very negative species that just want to use you for food. Because they use your blood and your energetics, hormones, etc. They feast on that. That's what reptilian beings do. Okay, Gary McKinnon, we just released, I just released a re-edited, it was basically the same interview, but I put it out on higher definition. And History Channel is, Ancient Aliens is going to be supposedly releasing that testimony on their channel. I think it's Rich Dolan that's going to be announcing it or something. But they are paying us a small amount in order to use our footage. Most people will know about the Iron Mountain Report. This is an excerpt. The bottom line is things like the Georgia Guidestones Iron Mountain Report. If you don't think they're out to kill you, then you really need to rethink things. Because they are. They're killing you slowly, or they're going to kill you fast. It just, you know, it's whatever they feel like at the moment. The bottom line is cancer, chemtrails, you know, pharmaceutical drugs, GMO foods, fluorescent lights. I mean, the list is so long in the ways that they want to dumb you down and actually have you die rather quickly, reach old age rather quickly so they can bring in Humanity 2.0 are amazing. But I want to say that activating your DNA through Kundalini activation will upgrade you in such a way that they can't actually kill you, that you can cure yourself of every disease out there. You have that in your abilities. Okay, every person can heal themselves of anything. It's all at your grasp. And if you don't cure yourself, it's because you've chosen, you know, maybe to use that as a crutch to sort of like, maybe you look this way too much when you were in your last life, so now you have to look this way so that you start balancing yourself out. No person can judge you, okay? Because they don't know all your lives. And therefore, when you meet a person, it behooves you to understand that, you know, someone who appears to be sort of a dumb blonde may be a scientist in another life. You know, I mean, this is really what's going on here. You're a huge whole-souled being, and you are experiencing this to bring into your self-realization of who you really are. So the body you have now is absolutely a temporary vehicle, and you've got lots of them. So, you know, relax, try to be less judgmental. Understand, you use things. You even use things like disease and crutches to avoid things. Maybe not in such a good way, because you might actually have to come back and relearn whatever it is you tried to avoid in this life. But you're using it on purpose, okay? So understand that you have a role in attracting that disease to you. Therefore, you have a huge role in repelling it. Jake Simpson was one of the experts on surveillance, big time. Okay, at this time I think I've been talking for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, correct?
Yep.
What, are we about 10 o'clock?
Like open it for questions. Hour and 12 minutes is what you're doing.
Okay, so I'm happy to start taking questions here.
Thank you. Hey, Kerry, thank you very much for coming here tonight. What I'm concerned about, it seems like things are being sped up so quick through the Illuminati that it looks like we're going to have a full-blown world government, I say within the next 7 to 10 years, and the way the economy is being degraded, and the possibility of what I've heard rumors of foreign troops already being stationed and pre-positioned over here. What is your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we get reports, and we reported on Camelot the movement of various troops. We've been told there's Russian troops, for example, in Washington, D.C., Colorado, even fighting fires, supposedly. You know, Chinese troops. There is already one world government. I mean, the bottom line, it's not 7 years out. What's happening now is it's just materializing sort of more gloves off. So they're revealing themselves to you more and more and more. But it's not like it just started because they're suddenly revealing it, that it's out of the test phase and now they're going into the real one. They've been doing it. You know, the surveillance that Edward Snowden is talking about has even been going on since the 1940s. Since the advent of television in your homes, they were able to use those cameras to view you. So, you know, there's so many levels to the rollout of this one world government. But, you know, I mean, you're right. What's going to happen here in the United States, I don't know. In other words, I have hopes, and I believe there are many white hats. In other words, people on the inside that actually don't become whistleblowers, but they, for all intents and purposes, are in the same headspace as the whistleblower. In other words, they have worked on the dark side long enough to have realized who those people really are. And they are now working counter to them, but they're doing it very secretly. And they're helping us unseen. And they stay alive this way, and they have to operate in that way. We're lucky, and you could look at it if on the reverse. We have spies on the inside. They have spies on the outside.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing what you do. I wonder, of all the things I could ask you, something struck me in what you said, and it's sort of inconsequential, but I was wondering if there's anything more you could tell us about the race of beings with the crooked pinky finger. Any specific detail? It relates to somebody I knew in the past. And you said that,
I appreciate that. You know, people have come up to me and said that. I mean, they've said they've actually met people like that, and I'm afraid that's all I know. I don't really know their other characteristics. I do know that there are plenty of races out there. I don't know which race has that sort of, what you might call a slight deformity.
So but they had thick, spongy skin or something, you wouldn't know about that?
No.
Okay.
But, you know, use your intuition. In other words, use your own radar.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll know, actually. I would encourage people to listen to or watch my interview with Timothy Good, which I recently did. He's a wonderful researcher from the UK. He's been writing books about this subject matter for years. He does various tests in order to get in contact with the ET beings that are out there that are in, looking humanoid. And he communicates telepathically to them. He sends a message out. He asks them to show up wherever he is, and actually has the most amazing experiences when they do. And they always look humanoid. And he's a person who's very in tight with the royal family in Britain, as well as top military officials. So he has a very inside track, and that interview reveals some very important information. Some people were having trouble with his accent, so we have now put, what do they call that, subtitles or whatever, on the video, so you can actually read as you listen, and you can't avoid hearing what he's saying.
Is that on your website?
All our interviews, yes, can be found on our website, but you can go onto our YouTube channel and find them all there as well. Because what happens is all videos go onto YouTube, because YouTube, I'm what's called a YouTube director. I'm one of the early members of YouTube, and I actually can put on a video as long as I want. In other words, I don't have to shorten it by 10 minutes or any of those kinds of things. So my videos are very long, and they're all on YouTube, and they're all free.
I just bought his latest book.
Good, yes. And let me tell you another anecdote about Timothy Good, because I saw him when I interviewed him at the UFO Congress in Arizona recently. They flew him over to speak, and halfway through his speaking on the stage, all the electronics quit. And he couldn't continue his presentation, and he was really fully only halfway. During that first half, he had been saying, just in the most soft, spoken British accent and so forth, very politely, that basically there were two races of beings on planet Earth, and they were our enemies, and we were at war with them. And he said that a number of times. And the one thing that I've noticed is that that's why I had that audio precept that we listened to in the very beginning. Because Dark Skies was a television series back in I think it was 1980s, around the same time with the X-Files, but they were basically saying that the ETs visiting us were not positively intentioned. And I believe Timothy Good was someone who they thought was not going to be talking about such a thing, and he actually kind of told the truth in that regard, that we are fighting against at least two very sophisticated races of beings that are not human, and they are very antagonistic and want to take over Earth. So this is not a fairy tale, okay? This is not like a pretty story. I think it will have a good ending in the end, because I believe humanity will transcend. But the reality is much different, and I think the minute you start talking about the real war going on, that the positive people in the secret space program are a part of. In other words, there are still good military people out there trying to protect us as humans. It's just that they're not all that way, and their leaders certainly don't have that in mind.
Hi, Kerry. That's a good segue to my question about Marshall Summers, who claims he's in telepathic contact with good ETs, but non-interfering, saying that there are alien races here to manipulate us, to try to win our consent to be ruled by them, much as a third world country during the Cold War might align with Russia or the U.S. and in effect be a client state. We'd be a client planet. Could you just give an opinion on how close to the mark he might be?
Thank you. Yes, I did interview Marshall V. Summers. He's a very eloquent man. I agree with most of what he says, and he's absolutely correct in his assessment that there are many ET races, and what they use, they don't use guns, to kill you. Their technology has to do with influence for the most part. They believe that the way to bring, they're after hearts and minds, okay? That's the bottom line. They want to bring you over to their way of thinking. And so they're going to mess with your mind. They're going to basically mind control you. And Marshall V. Summers call that persuasion, call that, advertising as a form of mind control. You do know that on your televisions. And so on. So ETs, they use this very, very often in order to try to influence you and to a negative point of view. In other words, they have an ulterior motive. They have a vested interest. They may want to be using you as food. They want to control you because you're good little workers. You might be able to build cities for them or whatever the hell they might want. They may just want access to the resources. They may want access to your DNA. They may want access to your blood, to your, hormones and so on. Yeah. Now, where I differ from Marshall V. and Summers, though, is an interesting difference. Ultimately, he kind of views humanity on an earlier path than I do. In other words, he kind of thinks that maybe you can't handle the truth and that you also are not ready, that humans are not ready to deal with the realities that we're dealing with every day. But my point of view, because I'm convinced that we are actually a composite of at least 12 ET races, is that we are them. So you can't say to us that you can't let your, former progenitors in here to this planet. We need to be completely sovereign and I'm not into an isolationist point of view, which is what Marshall V. and Summers is advocating. He's actually advocating that we take back our borders, so to speak, of planet Earth, send all the ETs home, and we deal with our own business here, because we're not ready to deal with them. I don't agree. I think humanity is far more advanced than we would give ourselves credit for, and I think we should go for it. I think that the ETs are, for the most part, underestimating you, and there is a huge mind control program which is orchestrated for the most part by the Greys, but also by the Archons and so-called Anunnaki, certain groups of them. Basically to tell you, in other words, have a program running in your head that says, I am bad. I am bad for the earth. I am a disease to the earth. Everything bad here is because of me, and so on and so forth. This is not true. You are not war makers by nature, in my view. All of this is programming. Okay? What they are, especially the reptilians, is war makers by nature. And this is what you're really dealing with. We're dealing with, if you listen to my interview on the front page of Camelot, with Mark Richards, Captain Mark Richards from the Navy, who he and his father went into Dulce and rescued a certain number of humans that were being experimented in Dulce, New Mexico, in the underground base. If you listen, and I went into prison in Vacaville to interview him. I was the only journalist who has done so for 30 years. He's been in prison, framed for a murder that he didn't commit. He is definitely a military man. He is treated that way, by the way, by his, keepers in the prison and so on. And he says that we are fighting at least 2 reptilian races, different reptilian races, that are in control of the planet at this time.
Excuse me, have you ever been aboard any of these UFOs or been abducted by a UFO or taken anywhere by those UFOs within the last 10, 15 years or so, or the last 20 years?
Well, I can tell you as a child I had multiple abductions, sort of dreams, consciousness, awareness of that. And there's no doubt whatsoever in my mind that I was. I believe that I have been visited. I have gone places with various beings on UFOs. I'm not so sure that they bother to abduct me anymore.
Well, have you ever talked to any of them in person and stuff while you were abducted by them or dealing with them? Do you remember that, talking to any of those reptilian ETs in person?
Yes.
Or Greys ETs in person?
Yes, but when you say in person, it would be like on a ship, interacting with them in that place. I mean, I can tell you one anecdote, which is Bill and I went to Norway and interviewed Leo Zagami, who was a whistleblower from the Vatican. And that's a very important interview, by the way. He only came out as a whistleblower for a short time, then he went back in and was in fact possessed very clearly, and I actually know that for a fact after that, which is a very tragic story. But he is somebody who became a whistleblower for a short time and then was, in essence, brought back in. During the time in Norway, I actually had sort of a very awake, conscious dream of a huge underground base there and these particular greys that run the place. And I was interacting with one group all night long, and I actually considered them to be extremely stupid. And they were trying to like mess with me, and I was basically sort of screwing with their heads the whole night. And in the morning when I woke up, I was exhausted because I'd been playing these stupid games with these insane beings. And I basically said to Bill, we're getting the hell out of here. And we got out of that area completely.
Well, have you seen or dealt with any of those UFOs and ETs recently?
Sorry?
Have you seen or dealt with any of those same UFOs or ETs recently or lately?
No, but I did see a really great ship of humanoids arriving here on planet Earth. Gigantic. 2 ships coming in a recent dream. I'm not sure what that's about, but they were gigantic.
Were they in this area?
No, I don't think it was here. I think that, I forget where it was, but, you know, I travel a lot, so I'm not sure where I was seeing that happening. It could have been Britain, though. I think it might have been England.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Kerry.
Hi.
I'm glad you mentioned Metatron, because my question is actually about the Emerald Order, Melchizedek, Cloister, and that Yasha Shanadin's material,
yes,
and that CDT plate translations. Regarding what happened at the end of 2012 and the beginning of January 2013, obviously that changed things a lot. So how has, in terms of like the different players, the different ETs that are all, you know, have a hand in the pie and have this sort of alliance now, basically, I guess, I think that's what's going on. How has that sort of changed since what happened at 2012, at the end of 2012, in terms of they're like creating a new world order, but now for what purpose? Like, am I making sense? Like, what's the end game of it? How has that changed since what happened at the end of 2012, the beginning of 2013, according to that material? If you've been kind of keeping tabs, it's hard to understand that material without the bigger context of all of it. Like, if you know.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question. You know, I have been in touch with Ashiana on and off, and actually asked her relatively recently for another interview. She's not ready to give one at this time, but I think in the future I will do another interview with her. I can tell you that there was a shift on, you know, at the end of 2012. I was actually in Egypt. The change in energetics was profound here on planet Earth. And that, from what I understand, she had been getting from the Guardians, the group of ETs that she's getting sort of downloads from, she had been getting that the planet Earth was going to have to go into a sort of step back, that some of us would in essence ascend, but that the Earth herself was not going to be moving up. I believe that at this time she's sort of changed her position on that slightly. And I'm not sure exactly where she's going with it, so I'm not going to put words in her mouth. I don't go to her workshops because I'm on this mission, and my mission is kind of with you, and so I need to do what I do. But I have high respect for her. I think she's a very good communicator between those groups and humanity, although she's been messed with quite a bit. So vessels, individuals, can also be interfered with. And she's going through a lot of legal problems because of her former partners in that organization. So that's why she can't, for one, do another interview, and also is being probably more circumspect, I think. But they have a very positive view of the future as a result of what happened after, you know, since 2012. And that the gates have been opened, that we are fully an ascension planet at this time. And that the ways in which we ascend may still going to be a little convoluted because some of the gates are taken over by the military-industrial complex, which involves Iraq, for example, having a gate there. But I was with Ashiana Dean in India, and we did create a gate because there was a couple gates that were blocked in India, and we actually created a portal. And up on this mountain at this amazing place in the Himalaya, a group of us, and there's a certain sort of ceremony that we went through to create this gate. And we did it twice that I remember, I think at least twice, actually maybe 3 times. But these are gates that have been created. So they're sort of being established. Those would be more newer gates. I can tell you that I did have a very profound experience at this one, in which I basically kind of fully consciously left my body during that event and came back, and it was quite profound. So there's something really substantial going on there.
Right, but it didn't really change. Like it looks like they're still doing what they've been trying to do from the beginning. So in terms of the Illuminati, it looks like they're still doing what they've been doing from the beginning, and that didn't.
No, we're not living in fairyland, and the reptilians didn't all leave, and
I'm not.
So on. Yeah, no, none of that, really, please.
All right.
And people that tell you that, please be very cautious. Listen carefully. Make sure you're not just following wishful thinking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm John.
Hi.
I really resonate with your thesis about there being a deliberate attempt to dumb us down. And frankly, I think it's gone pretty far already myself. But I wonder, from all the research you have done, all the interviews you've had, all the thinking you've done about this, how far have we gone down that path? Are we 80% of the way there? We're still only 10% of the way there? I mean, how far will this ultimately get?
Well, I mean, the trouble is that as much as they try to dumb us down, we're waking up. So you've got a really weird push-pull going on planet Earth. I mean, you must see it and witness it around you. And, you know, I know that people that come to meetings like this are pretty awakened. But you may also have a very derisive attitude towards the people around you that just seem like clones, or what you might call drones, going through their everyday life. And they seem very dumbed down, and I do understand that. But strangely enough, because of the nature of who you are as a being, these individuals who you think are so dumb may suddenly change in an instant. They could even wake up tomorrow morning with a completely different mentality, because suddenly something opened and they were able to access their own higher self for even a short time. And then their progress will be very, very rapid. And why will it be rapid? And I know that some people just are not like so thrilled with this, because you do all the hard work and then those people get to do it, you know, go instantaneously to the same place you've arrived at after years of work, right? But the fact of the matter is you're paving the way. The energetics is here. The platform is here. And my recent interview with Paul LaViolette is saying that the G2 cloud that is in our galactic, near the galactic center, contains at least one, what is probably a brown dwarf, and maybe another planet or more. And that may trigger a gravitic wave that actually may come through to Earth at this time and energetically, even right now. It's supposed to be happening this month and into April. What does that mean? Now, he's a very buttoned-down astrophysicist. I mean, he's not, you know, sort of airy-fairy, okay? So you can read his books. I mean, the guy is really plugged in. In fact, some say he's the, you know, if you admire Einstein, a kind of an Einstein of our time. So I do highly recommend my recent interviews with him. But one of the things that I asked him in the last interview I did with him was whether or not, because he was talking about how it could trigger volcanoes and earthquakes and so on and so forth, and that the sun could become more active, etc. And I said, well, is it possible that there are more negative ions? In other words, could it be that it actually could send this wave of energetics Do we know that it's like positive or negative? Do we know how it would affect us, our physicality? And he actually said, well, you know what? It's probably more negative ions on the planet Earth. And what does that mean? Anyone who knows anything about, healing knows that what we need are negative ions to help us, to stimulate us, to help us heal in every way. So you can appreciate how active volcanoes and earthquakes and an active Earth is not necessarily as negative as it may appear. Now, obviously, you don't want to be caught in a boulder that's coming straight for you or something squashed and down to, But the reality is that the energetics is allowing for the awakening on planet Earth. And this is why the Illuminati have taken the gloves off. And they're being so obvious about what they're doing right now. Like just taking a jet and disappearing it. Because they decided to bring it to an underground base and mess with the scientists. They're probably going to release them, mind control them, turn it into a false flag, who knows what. But the bottom line is whenever they put their stuff out there, less and less people are believing them. That's real. I mean, consciousness, awakened consciousness is quite catching. Even if you go among your family and you're more awake than normal, they're not going to know why, but you're going to start vibrating their molecules faster just by being in your presence. It's real. And so I understand that we're being dumbed down. We are. But don't fall for it. Don't allow for it. Shut off the fluorescent lights when you're in a situation. Wherever you can do that. They are really, really bad vibrationally for you. I mean, think about what you're eating. Don't eat the GMO foods. You know what I mean? The information is out there. So it can be countered, and it is being countered. And they will, yes, the clamps will continue. The clamping down will continue, but by the same token, so will the rise in consciousness.
So if I can summarize what you've said then, basically everything you've done suggests at the end of the day you're very optimistic. We're holding our own. There's a lot of opportunity to fight back and get this awareness that you're talking about.
I'm very optimistic about humanity. I really am. I've seen enough to be on this earth as long as I've been here that I have a very good opinion of our deepest selves, so to speak.
Thank you.
Hi, Kerry. I'm so glad you're here and to meet you. I love your work. I've been into it for a little while. I belong to a few groups on social media, and one of those groups, very intelligent women and men, pretty much African American, and we are trying to find out what is this force that is attacking us so viciously. It's like the collection of DNA, swabbing the mouth with DNA, the mass incarceration, just collecting. And I remember earlier you said something about they could be collecting body, biology from you, and the injection of the tainted AIDS virus that they're going around doing. And it's just really frustrating because you said they don't use guns. They're using power of influence. Mm-hmm. And I notice it's like almost every day there's this horrible video that's just making certain ones of us just look so like something's happening, and then you see it kind of play out in real life. You see it like, do they think that I'm like that? Do they think, and it's like coming from so many directions. And it's really heartbreaking. And so I'm wondering, who are this force that's doing it? You said it's two groups.
Yes.
And then I want to know, how can we directly protect ourselves from that attack? Because they are using people that look like us. And they're using a lot of the men that look like us, doing a lot of that attacking. So I'll just take my answer.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Let's say it's across all racial barriers, so that is going on for sure. But I appreciate what you said because there is a targeting happening. And certainly people of color have experienced this on this planet, especially this time around in a huge amount. I can say that in essence, it's a cliche, but for example, here in America, for all intents and purposes, we are under the Fourth Reich. Okay, so that Nazism it basically came over with the paperclip scientists. They also went to Russia. They also went to Argentina. These scientists were very, very active in the secret space program. They're very, very active in the upper levels of the bloodlines. These people are all about bloodlines. I think that there is a certain fear of the power that your people hold, for example. You have a very strong emotionality. You have a very strong sort of, you might say, heart, intellect connection that, should it ever come together really well, would make you quite powerful beings here on the planet. And it's like an intuitive connection with the heart, that you carry around with you. And because of the connection with Africa, where we all, at least at this point, originated from this incarnation, this version of humanity. There's also a past with your people that was different than the current one. Now, it depends if you want to kind of go down that road, but it's a very interesting one. It had to do with your race dominating the whites on the planet in a completely different version of humanity. And those Illuminati may be playing some kind of psychological payback game. Now, I don't know that for a fact, but I do know Ashiana Dean talks about this as being a very distant, one of the incarnations of humanity. In other words, at one time women were also on top and men were kind of like the lower, as you know that. What we are in at this time, I mean, we've made it through a lot of different sort of seedings of humanity. This particular seeding is going all the way. In other words, we are the ascension, the graduating class, for lack of a better word. That doesn't mean that individuals weren't graduating all along the way. But we're talking in large numbers going out at this time, leaving the planet, and in essence, sort of ascending on the levels of which you want to think about that. Because when you talk about ascension, there are so many levels that, it kind of becomes ludicrous to think about it just as you're not going to fifth dimension and going to sleep, all right? it's not even attractive or desirable in my view, but some people kind of get off on a fairyland like that. But the bottom line is that this group of humanity, you're all here. I mean, we have incarnating souls in mass. Of course, the numbers on the planet are huge at this time. There's a reason for that, okay? There's a reason why we have children coming in at this time. These children are composite beings. They are hybrids. Some of them are gray human hybrids, not all of them. Some of them are very interesting mixtures of other races being brought into the bloodlines at this time. So there are marvelous things happening. You're part of this huge experiment. I mean, the possibilities, they're not closed, okay? It's been a time on this earth, I think, when there has been oppression of various races. I know Indians, Native Americans here on the planet, certainly in the United States, have been heavily oppressed. Tragedies, all you have to do is go to an Indian reservation and see that. I mean, women, there's just so many groups of beings that are being oppressed. There's no doubt whatsoever that the sort of typical bloodline of the Illuminati is, white Anglo-Saxon, go up the food chain, German, In fact, there's a lot of evidence that the Aldebaran, beings from Aldebaran, which are very much the sort of Nazi physique, are ones that are part of the heavily, their DNA's definitely like the Bushes, kind of leans towards the reptilian side of things. There probably is an ongoing war, for example, with races that have more dark pigmentation between those and the Aldebaran group. These are all things that we sort of inherited the wars, if you will, so that we continue them because it's in our DNA. Some of us, I call us boots on the ground. That's what you are, in essence. But remember that you have a vested interest from before this incarnation. So you're also playing out those lines. And understand that your role is in those ways as well. You know, so, but thank you. Good question.
Hi, Kerry. I'm wondering if you have a whistleblower at Sandy Hook. There was a school expert, safety expert, that came forward with this week, and he said it was a drill. And some 9/11 researchers, Jim Fetzer, are really looking into Sandy Hook. Do you have any whistleblower information on that? Or?
Yes, some. I can say that, you know, there were Israeli Mossad there that were, you know, photographed on camera, and they were very much there as shooters. There's no doubt whatsoever that the kid that this was pinned on, and Adam
Lanza?
Yeah, I mean, you know, was a complete Manchurian candidate target. You know, he was killed the day before, from what I understand, or killed himself. So things of that nature. You know, I mean, it is fascinating. I have gone into a lot of research about the various, you know, false flags. That was a huge sacrifice as well. So it's an Illuminati sacrifice of children. There may have been some of that going on there as well. In other words, a blood sacrifice. Apparently some of the children weren't killed. They may have gone to underground bases. You know, Mars needs moms. Have you ever heard of that? I know it was a joke. It was supposed to be, I guess it was an animated thing done by Disney, like Illuminati special. I went to Disneyland a while back, not very long ago, with Sean David Morton and a friend. I mean, the programming in Disney, Walt Disney, and it's just amazing when you go there with this kind of mentality. Just amazing.
And so, one more question.
Sandy Hook is like that. It's
one
like
more question. One night, David Wilcock was on your show, and he had a major death threat. Can you tell me what topic triggered that? Tell us a little bit more background information on that event.
Well, what can I say about that? You know, in a weird way, some of us are definitely protected. I feel that I am protected, not just friends in high places, as Bob Dean would say, which has to do with, you know, various unseen ETs and so on, and whatever you want to call us on a spiritual level. But besides that, there are, of course, white hats, and David is protected as I am. He was threatened, no doubt about it. He was afraid because, you know, some people criticized him greatly because he was very emotional over that. I mean, you know, unless you can live it, unless it's happened to you, you won't really understand what it really means when it really happens. So everyone has their own dealings with that. Other than that, I can tell you that some of the information that David was dealing with is controversial, and not all of it do I agree with. I think that there is I think he was being manipulated in some ways around that. But I can also tell you that there are things that I can't tell you about that because they involve him personally and a whistleblower, and so I can't really go into more detail about that. But it was legitimate for that, you know.
Hi, Kerry. I'm Sotero.
Hi.
And I wanted to thank you for the wonderful information you gave us today regarding the consciousness and, you know, who we really are. Still, all of us are learning about it. And at the same time, I just wanted to tell you, you know, by the way, I'm on the same frequency you are. That feels good. You validated so many things that have occurred in the past 2-3 years in my own personal life. Thank you. And I have one question for you. In the last 2 months or so, I have, if it's possible, you know, with all the people, advanced, knowledgeable people that you talk to, I have learned that the heart, the human heart, holds certain memory bank and can transfer from one person to another when you get transplant. All right? Now, the question I have for you is the following. If a person, either me or anybody else, hugs another person and holds the hug for about 3 to 4 seconds, is it possible that some of that information will transfer to the one person And that person that picked up the information will have a dream that will include the other person, will include other people at a certain location, things that took place. I'm just beginning to experiment with that to find out whether that exists or not. I don't know if you have been asked this before.
No, but I think it's a very good question, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that would happen. Certainly, you're talking about an organ that's within the human body that contains, it's almost, it's sort of a mystical organ in a sense, the heart. And as you say, it contains memory and information, and this is electromagnetic, so your hands can connect with electromagnetic energy, and it comes in through your hands. And in fact, information comes to us this way as well, in a sense through osmosis. In other words, you can learn information is embedded in crystals, it's embedded in water. Why wouldn't it be embedded in the human heart? So
I understand the heart has an electromagnetic energy field of distance anywhere from 7 to 8 feet, and we pick up all kinds of senses from people, energies and things of that nature.
Yes.
And I think you did talk about it, and I'm very thankful for that. Where can I learn more about it on your website?
Well, I would watch Pete Peterson's interview for one thing, because he talks about the information field, and that's all about what, in essence, makes things like remote viewing possible. He talks about it from the point of view of a scientist, as a physicist, but he's also himself had a lot of experiences, metaphysical kinds of experiences. So he's a very wise man in that regard. So I watched that interview. It's quite long. So you might start there.
I would check that.
There are other things. Courtney Brown is dealing with remote viewers every day. They're getting all kinds of information, so it's coming through that way. The crystal skulls have information, but I'm also skeptic of the crystal skulls in the sense that they contain a lot of black. They've been dealt with by a lot of black magicians, so be very careful of those skulls. But thank you. So I guess I'll take one more question. This will be it. I know I've been here a long time, and people are tired, and my feet are killing me, so it's a long time to stand.
Just a short question. I'm Tony. I volunteered for you a year ago and enjoyed that. Met Stephen D. Kelly there, among other people. We had an earthquake yesterday up there on Sepulveda Pass. Heard any buzz about that?
It was a strange earthquake, let me say this, because I'm an earthquake sensitive. In other words, usually I get ill, I get a headache, and I also get these energetics in my feet before an earthquake. But I didn't have any warnings about that earthquake. And that was quite a substantial earthquake, at least where I lived. I live north of Calabasas, and the whole building did shake. It was about a 4.5. Some people call it a 4.4. So I'm suspicious about that particular earthquake. I'm wondering whether it wasn't really an earthquake, whether something else is going on.
Well,
Maybe they were moving
Kelly,
some furniture in the underground base.
Steve Kelly talks about all this dastardly stuff underneath the Getty Center.
Yeah.
I think that's just about where it was supposed to be centered from what I saw. 2 miles northwest of Westwood.
Yeah, it was quite, the epicenter was quite close to us. Yeah. So far nothing, no, whistleblower, nothing about that. But I'm just, as far as my own intuitive information. Hi everyone, thanks very much. I think my sound's okay, right? Okay, great. I'm gonna play something, if I can figure this out quickly. And if not, someone's gonna have to try to help me because it's kind of gone dark. I don't know why. Okay. I just need to play that audio, and it sort of disappeared off the screen.
Audio?
Yeah, it's the file's on there, but it was down there, but it sort of disappeared.
Too many things on it, that's why. So. This guy? No? Oh.
No.
What is this, my friend?
I don't know what that is.
I know what it is. Spyware, cropware, whatever it is. Lots of fun there.
It's in the background.
There, this thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, we'll start from the beginning?
Yeah, from the beginning.
All right. Well, lots of excitement, everybody. Thank you.
My name is John Lowengarth. I'm recording this because we may not live through the night. They're here, they're hostile, and powerful people don't want you to know. History as we know it is a lie.
The following is an excerpt from the majestic documents, which are said to have been leaked from above top secret. It describes the official government secrecy policy toward extraterrestrial contact. This policy was adopted in April 1954, 2 months after Eisenhower had first contact with at least 3 extraterrestrial races.
Any encounter with entities known to be of extraterrestrial origin is to be considered to be a matter of national security and therefore classified top secret. Under no circumstances is the general public or the public press to learn of the existence of these entities. The official government policy is that such creatures...
He's quite a brilliant man, and he is now releasing to the world all of his paperwork, all of his experiments, and he is training a core group of people who have joined him voluntarily, connected with him over the internet and so on. And he's just trying to get his work out there to the world. What happened was Sunday I did what was probably my 3rd or 4th interview with him, but he had contacted me and some other people on the web let us know that he was being actually threatened. He and his wife had been, and family were being threatened by the ex-king of Belgium. He had had to leave Belgium with his family, and he went to Italy. For the last, I think, half year or so, he was living in Italy and continuing his experiments and his investigations with his team. And then the threats started and actually intensified. I guess they've been going on all along. The threats became so severe that now he's not sure he's going to be able to continue living even. And they have threatened to torture his wife and child in front of him, etc. So if you listen to my video, which is on the Project Camelot YouTube channel, it's called Jag Bodhi. It's it's sort of a combination of jaguar and the word bodhisattva, really. I just made it up. Then you will see that we have a huge amount of videos there. Actually, there's around, well, there was 274, and now there's more. And we still have even more that some of which have not gone onto YouTube, most of which are all there. It takes hours and hours and hours of your life to watch our videos. What we don't do is sound bites. What we do is we interview somebody for at least 2 hours. We put a camera right straight in front of their face. We intercut between me, the interviewer, and the person. I ask hard questions. I'm not your usual interviewer. I get a lot of flack for that, but I'm not apologizing here because I actually honed my skills as an actor and a director and a writer in Hollywood. And so I actually know what I'm doing. When I interrupt people on purpose, I'm actually trying to cut across their programming. And a lot of these people, a lot of the people I deal with, whistleblowers, even authors and experiencers, but especially whistleblowers and experiencers, will have a lot of programming. And what happens, programming becomes obvious when a person starts talking kind of like a tape is going in their head. And you can almost, well, at least I can tell as an intuitive, and if you get good at this, anyone could probably figure it out. So if you interrupt them, what happens is you interrupt the tape in their head. And you require the mind to become engaged, and the emotions, because they get a little befuddled by being interrupted. A lot of people have canned speeches and explanations for things that they're used to sort of spieling out. But in my interviews, I'm really looking for the truth. I'm doing that on behalf of humanity. I think it's something that everyone needs to know. I think you have a right to it. I think you can handle it. And I don't avoid the hard questions. So that's what Project Camelot is all about. It is guerrilla filmmaking for all intents and purposes. We do not rely on heavy electronics or we don't have a big crew. It was always just Bill Ryan, myself, and a volunteer cinematographer, or myself by myself. And that's really what we've been doing for the last 8 years. It's been incredibly successful. We are building what we consider to be the big picture of what's going on here in this reality. And I'll be happy to talk about that in depth tonight. Some of the major questions you want to ask yourself are these particular questions. And it's really important. Surprisingly few people, maybe not so much yourselves, because as members of this organization, or even if you're here as a visitor, also here we're all visitors to planet Earth. But if you're here at UPARS as a visitor, then you know that that we are not alone. But the question top secret clearances, and that means they could be magic eyes only or above. And this is a very select group of people. Obviously, being a whistleblower is a very dangerous pastime for ex-military employees and members of the secret space program, etc. Now, some of these people are authors and researchers. Most of them will be quite well known. Other people are also experiencers or contactees. And so we really go the whole gamut. We investigate every kind of conspiracy out there. And there's very few things that we would say we're not interested in, because we are all about revealing the matrix as it really is and what's really going on beneath the matrix. And I better be careful. Here are some of the whistleblowers and witnesses, and people that know Camelot will recognize these faces. So Project Camelot was started, actually I've been in operation for over 8 years at this point. It was in 2006 that I hooked up with Bill Ryan, and Bill Ryan, this is him as a baby. We put our baby pictures on here. It was kind of a joke. That's Bill Ryan. Everyone recognizes the hat. He's actually not part of Camelot anymore, other than, you're always part of Camelot if you've been involved with it. But he does his own thing. He's living in Ecuador with his wife at this time, kind of off the grid, creating a community, I imagine, down there. We're not in close touch. And I've been running Camelot for about 4 years. So after 8 years of operation, that means he was with me about half the time. We have a huge following on the internet, and it is growing every day. And we're very happy about that. However, I can say that just recently, if you're paying attention to Project Camelot, then you know that I did an interview with M.T. Kesh, who is a free energy inventor, and he's actually a physicist from Iran originally, who then went to Belgium and started an organization called the Kesh Foundation. He's been very involved in what's called plasma physics, but then he actually kind of went off in his own direction.
Do not exist, and that no agency of the federal government is now engaged in any study of extraterrestrials or their artifacts. Any deviation from this stated policy is absolutely forbidden. Magic eyes only.
What the hell they want? I assume you, ladies and gentlemen, have all seen E.T. They're nowhere near that nice.
Okay, I don't know if you could understand that because there's a little garbled sounding, but that is a short excerpt at the end from Taken, and he says they're nowhere near that nice. And so I think that should have stopped by itself. I'm going to hope that it does. Okay, hold on 1 minute here. So this is about as full screen as I think I'm going to get it. Unless... Okay. Great. Okay, first of all, and this is going to be a little difficult because it's kind of hard for me to see y'all, but if you raise your hand, if you could tell me if you, first of all, say how many people are familiar with Project Camelot? Raise your hand. Okay, a very good showing. How many are not familiar with Project Camelot? Please raise your hand. Okay, there's a few. All right, so mostly familiar. The reason I ask you that is because I can go way down the rabbit hole, and I just want to make sure that the people who don't know who I am and don't know who Project Camelot is get sort of a briefing along the way, and they're just going to have to kind of get up to speed really fast. So at the end, I will allow at least a half hour for questions, and I'm happy to answer anything, really. Okay, so hopefully this will work. These are some of the pictures of our whistleblowers. What we do is we investigate whistleblower testimony, like Julian Assange, but we go way above top secret. So that means that our whistleblowers, by and large, have above